Today on Central Illinois on the Record, promoting minority-owned businesses, how the state is working with local leaders to provide tools for success. Plus, Democrats debate for the last time before the Iowa caucus, what they had to say as they look to round up support. And cracking down on police, why officers may have to get a warrant before using a cell phone tracking device.
Now, from your local election headquarters, this is Central Illinois on the Record.
About FY17 budget because we're still stuck on FY16.
Lawmakers fight for compromise as talks of skipping the year's budget start to surface. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Central Illinois on the Record. I'm Paul Cicchini. More than halfway through 2016's fiscal year, state lawmakers still cannot agree on how to pay for the rest of it. Now there's some disagreement over whether to discuss passing that budget. CIOTR's Hannah Hilliard has more on why some legislators want to combine the budgets from this fiscal year and the next.
This is critical.
We've heard it over.
Health departments have been forced to cut programs, reduce staff and hours of service.
Over.
And we need to get this stopped.
And over again. Yet 7 months into 2016's fiscal year, there's still no budget.
I would have never dreamed that on July 1st, that on January 20, we still would not have a budget.
Now the question is, where does the state go from here?
Rank and file individual legislators, we need to be willing to talk about what we're willing to do to try and move the ball forward.
House Representative Jahan Gordon Booth says state legislators talk about the state budget consistently, but says it's ultimately up to Governor Bruce Rauner and House Speaker Mike Madigan.
The direction that their conversations are going will largely dictate what happens with this process.
The next time all of the General Assembly will be in Springfield is January 27th to hear the governor's State of the State address. And Gordon Booth says there should be one clear message: how to pass a 2016 spending plan for Illinois.
With us having the State of the State address, honestly, as it relates to the State of the State, I don't know what else there is to talk about.
Republican State Representative Mike Eunice says he is interested in exploring a 2-year agreement to start restoring some trust within the state government. Social service agencies, they're simply saying something needs to happen.
We're mostly concerned with 2016. I mean, we're mostly concerned how to fill out till June 30th, which is the 2016 fiscal year. Then we're very nervous about what are they going to decide about 2017.
The Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault says without a budget, its funding will run out at the end of March. That could mean closing centers for prevention of abuse across the state. Well, Illinois is ranked near the top for states with the highest state and local tax burden. The land of Lincoln is number 5. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation released its annual rankings last week. The report showed 11% of all income goes towards state and local taxes, meaning on average, people in Illinois pay more than $4,000 to the state. Defibrillators could be found in more public places, including libraries. The bill is now waiting for the governor's signature. CIOTR's Emily Fannin has more from the Capitol.
Okay, everybody clear?
Harold Lame sees AED machines around town, but not everywhere. And he knows firsthand that having a pacemaker, an AED machine, can save his life.
In my case, if my pacemaker quits, I'm gone, unless I can get to the hospital quick enough or something. So they need to know how to operate them and how they're supposed to be used.
Legislation would allow public libraries to apply for grants to get AED machines installed.
I think it's a good idea because they're pretty prevalent. Several people have them.
The American Heart Association recommends that you are CPR trained before using an AED, but now all AEDs are fully equipped with step-by-step instructions that can save someone's life.
To patient's bare chest. Every minute that ticks by without CPR, without the AED being done, with the CPR, lessens the person's chance of survival by 10%.
Al Lewin educates hundreds of people each year on how to properly use an AED machine and perform CPR. He says libraries are a great place to have them because they're highly populated places year-round.
In those first few minutes after a person goes into cardiac arrest, we got to take immediate action. So what the defibrillator does is provide that shock.
After the shock, a person can be stabilized while waiting for an ambulance to arrive. AED machines range from $800 to $1,200. Lame says it's an affordable price to save a life.
And it's just good to have that comfort feeling that it's available.
Now, the legislation would not require libraries have the machines, just the option to apply for one. All right, mixed responses met Ameren, Illinois after December's winter storm, prompting some to call for an investigation. But that's not going to happen. The Illinois Commerce Commission will not look into Ameren's response to the storm. The commission looked at a number of factors before making its decision, including follow-up meetings with Ameren and a report submitted by the power company. Well, from cold to warm, last year's high temperatures are in the record books. 2015 officially the hottest year we've seen. That's according to both the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and NASA. The two have been keeping record of the average temperatures for the last 136 years. They say last year was more than 20% warmer than 2014, the previous hottest year. Experts say the record-breaking heat was fueled in part by one of the strongest El Niños on record. Still to come, changes are coming to college prep testing. Why high schools say the state is leaving them unprepared. But first, giving minority businesses a boost, how a leader in Central Illinois is stepping up to help.
It continues to be a hard fight to get our city, as a matter of fact, to look at and invest in minority businesses.
Providing tools for success, the Rauner administration and leaders in Central Illinois are targeting minority-owned businesses. Unbelievable, and not in a good way. That's how Peoria's 1st District Councilwoman describes the number of minority-owned businesses in the River City. But she says the numbers aren't due to a lack of talent. CIOTR's Marvis Herring has details about how that could soon change.
I don't think that it's friendly to minority businesses, otherwise there would be more.
Sham St. Louis is the co-founder and CEO of the X Factor agency in Peoria. She's also a member of the River City's Black Business Alliance, and she says she'd like to see a change in the trend when it comes to business owners.
When it comes to the business and the entrepreneurship realm, it's typically dominated by men.
St. Louis tells me she joined the Peoria BBA because it teaches business development and helps minorities turn dreams into reality.
Because the only color we see is green.
Councilwoman Denise Moore knows the struggles of getting a business off its feet. That's part of the reason why she began the Black Business Alliance years ago. But she says one meeting per month wasn't enough.
If you came to a meeting and you became very inspired, but you needed some assistance a few days later, there was really nobody to go to. And so I finally decided it was time to launch a Minority Business Development Center here in Peoria.
The Minority Development Center will have longer hours and be open on Saturdays, which is good for those still working a full-time job to pay the bills. She says the center is there to target problems that may be specific to minority-owned businesses.
Our focus is on ethnic minorities. women, and veterans.
The data from 2008 and 2013 shocked her when it came to the ethnicity and gender makeup of CEOs.
It indicated that the number of African American, let's just work with African Americans here, the number of African American businesses in Peoria is so small, it doesn't even register as a number on the chart. It's a footnote. That's unbelievable.
Unbelievable, but now she's working to restore faith that anyone who is serious about starting a business in Peoria can.
Because at the end of the day, you want to make money.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter what you look like. People will be coming here not only for major corporations, but because they hear there's something going on in Peoria. Peoria's a little different. They're making it happen, but we're not doing that right now.
Denise Moore was also chosen as one of the members of the Advancing the Development of Minority Entrepreneurs program. It's a new initiative being launched by the governor's office this spring. Well, still ahead, pushing police to get a warrant, how a new law could change the way cops can use cell phones to track criminals. But up next, high schools say the state needs to step up why they're worried about college prep testing.
You're watching Central Illinois on the record.
The lack of a state budget is affecting high schools across Illinois. After years of offering the ACT to juniors, Illinois is moving to the SAT. But many schools are left without a clear idea of how the test will be funded or even when it will be given. CIOTR's Lindsay Harrison talked to one local school about how it's preparing students.
Right about this time of year, juniors at Bloomington High School would usually be starting to prepare for the ACT. But this year, things are different. Illinois is instead opting to give students the SAT. It's a major change.
We have had almost 15 years of ACT data that we've been able to analyze and look at to drive our instructional practices. So this is going to be a really big change.
The change is one that's being felt around the state.
It isn't a common test that's taken in the Midwest.
But one of the biggest challenges this year isn't just switching tests. Schools like Bloomington are left in limbo while they wait for the state to nail down a budget.
I think that's the reason we don't have as much details, because we're waiting on a state budget.
According to Amanda Jarvis with Bloomington High School, the State Board of Education is planning to pay for the test, but without clear funding, they're not sure when the money will come.
It's hard for our teachers to plan ahead.
Jarvis says the lack of planning will make this year difficult, but she believes students will be okay.
It mimics the ACT a little bit more closely than it ever has before. So what teachers have been working with students on thus far will probably still suffice.
Until they know more, schools and students are preparing as best as they can.
Just, try to let kids know, this is what's coming as soon as we know. And that's all you can do at this point.
In Bloomington, Lindsay Harrison, WMBD News.
Jarvis says for now the school is encouraging students to sign up for the ACT or SAT on a national testing day. She says if it turns out the state will not pay for students to take the test, there are fee waivers available for qualifying students. A shift of nearly $300 million could be the saving grace for public schools. The State Board of Education would move money from special education into the general school funding formula. All but the wealthiest districts would see an increase in state funding. Lawmakers will discuss the plan further when they talk more about the budget. In the meantime, the low flow of state money to colleges seems to be hitting Chicago State University the hardest. CSU officials say the school will run out of money in March, although the school's president says the school will complete the spring semester. Congressman Bobby Rush from Chicago blames Governor Rauner, calling him misguided. Rauner's office says the administration is concerned about all of the state's universities, and the best way to help them is for Democrats to pass a balanced budget. Well, now campuses across Illinois are forming a coalition to get something done. It comes weeks after presidents at 9 public universities sent a letter demanding funding. Without the money, several public universities and community colleges across the state will no longer be financially viable. At this point, many campuses are dipping into their reserves to cover the cost for MAP grants and other programs. The Rauner administration released a plan it says can cut down on excess spending at colleges. The memo suggests cutting waste with administrative costs. It criticized colleges that spend thousands on private jets and cars, as well as executive compensation, and using state money to lobby, as well as tuition and fee waivers and severance packages. Well, coming up, it's being called a heroin vaccine, a look at how a drug is being used to prevent addiction. But first, changing the way cops monitor cell phones, why lawmakers could require officers to get a warrant.
You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
A tracking system used by law enforcement may face tighter restrictions. It's called the Stingray. A bill proposed in Springfield would require a court order for any agency looking to use one. Now, the machine acts as a cell tower, tricking phones in the area into transmitting to that location. Police use it to identify criminals and possibly prevent crimes. Lawmakers want to make sure innocent people are protected.
Our goal here is to protect both the innocent bystanders from having their information unfairly surveilled and collected, as well as making sure constitutional parameters are followed.
4 states require a warrant before the device can be used by police. Illinois is among 16 states looking into it. A bill introduced in Congress would require a warrant in all 50 states. Central Illinois is one of many areas nationwide exploring new ways to keep drug addicts from returning to old habits.
What can we do to reduce their chance of going back out and using again?
Vivitrol is a drug many addiction recovery specialists are using. It's made to block effects of opiate-related drug use like heroin and prescription pill abuse if a patient relapses. It also targets cravings for these drugs. The Unity Point Health Illinois Institute for Addiction Recovery tells CIOTR it's recommended an oral version of the drug called naltrexone.
It's a form of relapse prevention. When it's paired with a program that is focused on sobriety, support, etc., it can be very effective for early recovery.
Naltrexone is a medication taken daily. Vivitrol is administered as a shot taken once every 28 days. About 30 states use the Vivitrol treatment. In the Peoria area, emergency crews respond to at least one heroin overdose every single day. Last month, city and county leaders put together a heroin task force to help stop the abuse of the deadly drug. It's made up of nearly 20 people and includes 3 components: community education, law enforcement, and a health initiative. The task force also plans on reaching out to the medical community to get addicts help. The groups received federal money to help pay for the task force, but for the most part, it's officers putting in extra effort to end the epidemic. Well, still to come, Sarah Palin endorses the Donald, how Trump is responding to her support. But first, what the Democratic presidential candidates had to say in their final debate before the Iowa caucus.
You're watching Central Illinois on the record.
The Republican National Committee is cutting ties with NBC News, instead partnering with CNN for February's Super Tuesday debate. The decision comes 2.5 months after the RNC suspended its partnership with NBC News following the October 28th CNBC debate in Boulder, Colorado. Republicans criticized how that debate was handled and say CNBC moderators had a mean-spirited tone and presented a series of gotcha questions. The Republican debate will now air on CNN on February 25th. That's just 5 days before Republican voters in Texas and 13 other states head to the polls and caucuses for Super Tuesday on March 1st. The final Democratic debate before the Iowa caucuses took place 1 week ago. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley appeared just blocks from the site of the deadly mass shooting at Emmanuel AME Church. As Kim Hutcherson reports, Sanders and Clinton are now neck and neck in Iowa, and Sunday's debate was much less friendly than we've seen so far.
Democratic presidential candidates took the stage in Charleston amid a tightening race between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. On Sunday night, the gloves came off. As expected, the candidates clashed on gun control. Sanders hit out at Clinton.
Well, I think Secretary Clinton knows that what she says is very disingenuous. I have a D- voting record from the NRA.
While Clinton doubled down.
I am pleased to hear that Senator Sanders has reversed his position on immunity, and I look forward to him joining with those members of Congress who have already introduced legislation.
And O'Malley found an opening for humor.
I would have to agree with both of them. They've both been inconsistent.
Moderator Lester Holt asked about concerns over Sanders' electability, especially with minorities.
When the African American community becomes familiar with my congressional record and with our agenda and with our views on the economy and criminal justice, just as the general population has become more supportive, so will the African American community, so will the Latino community.
Pre-debate coverage had been dominated by the release of Sanders' Medicare for All health care plan. Clinton slammed the proposal while reminding the audience she's pushed for health care reform since her time as First Lady.
People may remember that I took on the health insurance industry back in the 90s. We've accomplished so much already. I do not want to see the Republicans repeal it, and I don't want to see us start over again with a contentious debate. I want us to defend and build on the Affordable Care Act and improve it.
Candidates also discussed police brutality, campaign finance reform, and regulating Wall Street. Now we wait for the Iowa caucus to learn which candidate impressed voters most. I'm Kim Hutcherson reporting.
Now, the debate is not the last time those Democratic candidates will speak to a national audience before the Iowa caucus on February 1st. CNN is hosting a presidential forum where the candidates will speak separately on January 22nd. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin is backing Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump. Trump has said he is greatly honored by the endorsement. Palin, who was the 2008 Republican vice presidential candidate, said she was proud to endorse Trump. The official endorsement came Tuesday night at a rally in Ames, Iowa. The Supreme Court will take up President Obama's executive action on immigration this term. As Diane Gallagher reports, the court could decide whether his decision to keep millions of illegal immigrants from being deported violates the Constitution.
The president's controversial executive action on immigration is going to court. The program allows more than 4 million undocumented immigrants whose children are U.S. citizens to apply for work permits and avoid being deported temporarily.
We've got a strong argument to make, both in terms of the legal ground on which we're operating, but also in terms of the practical impact, positive impact, that these executive actions will have.
The president laid out his vision back in 2014.
You'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. That's what this deal is.
But so far, that hasn't happened. 26 states filed a lawsuit blocking it from taking effect, accusing the president of abusing his power by going around Congress. Now, the Supreme Court will hear the arguments in April and would likely issue its ruling in June. That's just before the conventions, in the middle of the presidential campaign season. No matter what that ruling is, the outcome of the election could impact the future of the program.
The window of time that people have to come forward is much more narrow, and the big if is the fact that this is a temporary program. A new president, whether it was Democrat or Republican, could very well cancel this, and there's so much confusion in the immigrant community over what to do.
In Washington, Diane Gallagher reporting.
A decision in that case is expected in June. The U.S. military expanding the ways to fight ISIS in Afghanistan. The Pentagon says U.S. forces can now pursue ISIS in the war-torn country. They did not have that legal authority. Under previous rules, the military could only go after ISIS elements that posed a threat to U.S. forces in the area or served as a part of a bigger counterterrorism mission. Last week, the State Department designated ISIS in Afghanistan and Pakistan as a foreign terrorist organization. That meant a change in the rules of engagement. Now, U.S. forces can go on the offensive and actively go after ISIS members as a threat to the U.S. Finally, something to think about. The 62 richest people collectively have as much wealth as the 3.6 billion people who make up the bottom half of the world's population. That's according to a new report from Oxfam International. The study draws from the Forbes annual list of billionaires and Credit Suisse's Global Wealth Data Book. Back in 2010, it took 388 ultra-rich individuals to own that portion of global wealth. Oxfam also says the top 1% own more than everyone else combined. A separate report from last year from the Pew Research Center found poverty worldwide has fallen by nearly half over the past decade. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Central Illinois on the Record. Of course, you can always catch up with us on social media. Connect with WMBD and me on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag CIOTR. We'll see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of WMBD, WYZZ, or Nexstar Broadcasting Group.